Hey, Red Roadrunner. Let me just check. Can you hear me okay? Is my sound loud enough? Hey, Amer, it's great to see you back for more. I was hoping you'd show up again. I can see that my avatar is bouncing, so I'm assuming that you can hear me okay. I'm quite lagged though, so between the time that I speak and the time that I actually see that I'm speaking. So hopefully that won't become an issue for me. Looks and sounds fine. Great. I appreciate it. So I'm glad you showed back up. We're going to pick up right where we left off. And I want to get right into it because it's quite a bit to cover tonight to finish the first section. And I can't wait to get to the next section because it is going to probably, I'm not reading ahead, so I'm just guessing. But part 2 of the book actually goes into police and investigative psychology, which will probably, that sounds exciting. So I want to go ahead and get through with the overview of the different types of careers and what's included, what, in the forensic sciences and all that. We got quite a bit to cover so that next time we go live, which should be Wednesday, we can get into that police, what was it called again? Police and investigative psychology. That sounds exciting. So I'm going to get right into this so that we don't have to spend another stream on the overviews. Hey, Lit, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in forever. Lit, what we're doing here is we are learning about forensic psychology. So if that interests you, I hope you'll hang around and listen. To those who will listen later, because I know that other people are live right now and they're all into the drama and all that, and that's fun stuff too. But hopefully people will come over here and listen on the playback and comment. So here's the thing. If you're in here listening and you want to talk to each other in the side chat, I really would appreciate that. Welcome people who come in, say hi to them. Maybe if they ask what's going on, tell them a little bit, because I'm going to be looking away quite a bit. And, if you want to talk over there in the side chat, go right ahead. All right. So we're going to pick up with where we left off. And where we left off was comparing forensic psychology to forensic psychiatry. So we're going to go over the differences between those. Okay, psychologists, especially clinical, counseling, and forensic psychologists, are often confused with psychiatrists by the public and the media. Today, the lines of separation between the two professions are becoming increasingly blurred. Clinical counseling and some forensic psychologists, along with psychiatrists, are trained to provide direct treatment services to persons with emotional, cognitive, or behavioral problems. Psychiatrists are medical doctors, or MDs, or in some cases, doctors of osteopathy, DOs, who specialize in the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of mental, addictive, and emotional disorders. Psychologists do not hold a medical degree, although some may have earned related degrees, such as a Master's of Public Health. And another distinction between the two has been the license to prescribe drugs, including psychoactive drugs. Traditionally, psychologists have not been permitted by law to prescribe any medication. Now, even that distinction is beginning to disappear, as on March 6, 2002, New Mexico became the first state in the United States to allow properly trained psychologists to prescribe psychoactive drugs or drugs intended to treat mental disorders. that kind of scares me, especially knowing that I have a master's in psychology and how very little we actually studied medications. I mean, we studied the way they work, what they bind to, um, what, that kind of stuff. But as far as actually studying like dosages and chemical properties and all that, we did not. Um, so that's a little scary to me. Although, if New Mexico were to require that you have kind of some kind of training in that, I might change my mind. But knowing what I know about my education, I would not be comfortable being responsible for prescribing medications. Maybe suggesting medications to someone who knew about them more. But yeah, that's a little scary to me. Okay, at this writing, it appears Hawaii has made significant strides in enacting similar legislation, and prescription legislation has been introduced recently in Georgia, Connecticut, Missouri, and Tennessee. Psychologists in Guam gained prescription privileges in 1999. So, like I said, if they're learning more about the medication side of it in their degree, that could be okay. But what I learned, I would not be comfortable being the person responsible for introducing medications to people. Many psychiatrists, like psychologists, work in a variety of forensic settings, including the court, correctional facilities, and law enforcement. Psychiatrists who are closely associated with the law are often referred to as forensic psychiatrists. In some areas, such as issues relating to insanity determination by the courts, psychiatrists are more visible and sometimes more preferred than psychologists. That's understandable. As we will discuss in a later chapter, this reflects a greater comfort on the part of some judges with the medical model approach to mental disorder. Psychologists and psychiatrists seem to be equally involved in pretrial assessments of juveniles and custody evaluations, while psychologists are more likely than psychiatrists to consult with law enforcement and offer treatment in the correctional system. Law-related research tends to be the bailiwick of psychologists, although some psychiatrists are engaged in conducting and publishing such research as well. Since the 1970s, there has been an enormous expansion of the profession of psychology in general. And just to stop real quick and say, since the 1970s, that's when actually people started deinstitutionalizing mental health clients. So a lot of people were starting to be released from facilities to live out in the open community. And a lot of those places were shut down. So it's not surprising that since the 1970s, there's been an enormous expansion of the profession of psychology. It's right in line with that time frame. Psychology encompasses a wide spectrum of topics ranging from engineering designs to animal behavior and has a place in every imaginable setting. Psychologists can be found in personal selection and training development, developing user-friendly computer software, the delivery of psychological services to victims of natural and man-made disasters, the profiling of serial killers, the creation of effective commercials that increase the sale of products, and so on. And you would be probably someone who hasn't been interested much in that would be surprised at how much psychology and psychologists are asked about things like that, like commercials and how to get people to buy products, to consume all the things that we see on the TV or hear about on the radio and such. Let me check the chat here. Psychologists know the patient better, though. So, yeah, right, Amer. Psychologists do know those patients better because psychologists are usually the ones who actually talk to them, who spend time with them. In my experience, psychiatrists are the ones who see you for 15 minutes. They, briefly will say, "How are you doing? Do you feel like the medications are working? And, if so, then the medication stays the same. And if you say you're not doing well on the medications and you're having side effects, they'll increase or decrease dosages, change the medications, and you're out the door. Where a psychologist, when you come in and they ask how you're doing, that becomes a conversation instead of just a point of, how are you doing on the medications? They actually delve into how are you doing in life, in your community, in your relationships, and how can we, hey, just like that, it's great to see you. How can we make things even better or less bad? They may set goals with you. They spend much more time doing the talking, finding out what's actually affecting you, how you can work around it, helping you find ways to be better. So, yeah, I feel like psychologists do know their patients a lot better than psychiatrists. Although I have had experience in working situations where a psychiatrist that I worked with, he was wonderful. Um, Not only did he do medications, but he was actually the one who did therapy with people. He was an amazing psychiatrist, and uh, but that's not in general what you find in a psychiatrist. So, all right, let's get back into this. I'm going to skip over just a little bit because some of it's just a reiteration. And like I said, I want to be able to get to that police and investigative psychology on Wednesday. So nothing is going to stop me from getting through part one. Okay. About 75,000 undergraduate psychology majors graduate each year from the nation's colleges and universities. Here, they're just going to talk about how much the degrees cost, the salaries, all that. I don't think we need to go over that. At the master's level, clinical counseling and school psychology attract the most students. In some states, graduates of master's degrees programs in psychology with the appropriate clinical training may be eligible for licensure as psychological associates, LPAs, or master's level psychologists. And that is the case in most states that I've looked into have master's levels licensure. I am not licensed. I decided after all that education and everything not to get licensed because really it just was not a good fit for me. So, in other states, graduates with master's degrees in psychology are not allowed to practice psychology, at least not use that label, and are instead licensed with non-psychology titles such as licensed mental health counselor, marriage and family therapist, or psychotherapist. In a survey conducted in North Carolina, Sally Joy McCain and her associates asked state and private employers if they employed LPAs. Through this method, they were able to identify 345 master-level psychologists working within the state. The researchers discovered that 158 were employed at mental health centers, 108 were with the State Department of Corrections, 54 were working at residential centers that served the developmentally disabled, and 25 were employed at state psychiatric hospitals. And so that's not really, too surprising. I myself, I have experience working in a mental health center, a county mental health center. This was actually before the state changed like licensure and all that. I did not have a master's degree when I was working for the county mental health center, but I've also worked in residential centers and have experience with psychiatric hospitals, although I did not work directly for one. Okay. Let's see. At the doctoral level, clinical psychology attracts the largest number of students of all the applied specialties and is considered the entry-level credential for the independent practice of psychology. And then they talk about salaries and all that, again, I'm not really interested in that. If you are, it's easy to look at the salary, look that up on Google. Let's see. All right, applied specialties. Although the subspecialties of applied psychology may have distinct features, journals, associations, and interests, they also have many things in common. The similarities between counseling psychology and clinical psychology, in particular, are far greater than the differences. The clinical psychologist typically experiences 9 or 12 months of supervised internship in a clinical setting, where the theories and methods acquired in graduate training can be applied to human behavior problems. The counseling psychologist receives much the same training as the clinical psychologist, including the internship. In the past, the major distinction between the two was their focus. The counseling psychologist was trained to evaluate and treat persons with adjustment problems, such as those relating to education, job, personal, and marital relationships, while the clinical psychologist was trained to evaluate and treat persons suffering from more serious behavior and mental problems found in mental hospitals or psychiatric clinics. So, counseling psychology is often someone you go and talk to about, life's issues, whether that be relationships, work problems, things like that, where clinical psychologists work more in the field with, or not in the field, work more in counseling and talking and diagnosing of actual mental illness. The distinction is rapidly becoming blurred, however. Both counseling and clinical psychologists are employed in a wide assortment of settings, including college and university counseling centers, university research and teaching positions, independent practice, healthcare settings, hospitals, and the legal forensic system. About 40% of the doctoral level practitioners are in private or independent practice. Both counseling and clinical psychologists at the doctoral level are licensed in all 50 states, usually under the same designation of licensed practicing psychologist. Okay, let's see. Let me just glance over the next portion and see if it's anything really worthy of taking our time. If it's in the book, I mean, we can assume that it's worthy, but come on, we're more interested in the nitty gritty of getting into the forensic psychology stuff. I think we can safely skip over that. It's just giving like an overview of how to specialize in school psychology and things like that, working with children. Okay, so forensic psychology as a specialty. In August 2001, the Council of Representatives of the American Psychological Association voted to recognize forensic psychology as a new specialty. Although this is an important step forward, recall that the other specialties also provide services in forensic settings. It remains too early to tell whether these psychologists will change their affiliations or will identify with more than one specialty. It should be noted that the Council adopted a narrow rather than broad definition of forensic psychology. It was ultimately decided that the petition for specialization should define forensic psychology narrowly to include the primarily clinical aspects of forensic assessment, treatment, and consultation. At this point, it is not clear whether the new specialty embraces the wide variety of settings discussed in this text, although we follow the direction of the petition by focusing primarily on the clinical aspect of forensic psychology. We also interpret clinical broadly. It includes services provided across the 5 areas outlined earlier in the chapter, which were police psychology, psychology of crime and delinquency, victimology and victim services, legal psychology, and correctional psychology. So the educational and training requirements in forensic psychology are the growth in the field that based on the growth in the field that is demonstrated by the recent development of several graduate programs in forensic psychology at both the master's and doctoral levels. Throughout the world, particularly in Canada, United States, United Kingdom, and Australia. There has also been considerable growth in training opportunities in forensic psychology at the predoctoral, internship, and postdoctoral levels. In recent years, a discernible expansion has also occurred in the number of doctoral programs in clinical and counseling psychology that offer at least one or more courses, practica, or internships in forensic psychology. Many colleges and universities offer courses in forensic psychology, legal psychology, or psychology and law at the undergraduate level. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. I'm so sorry, but some of this just seems unnecessary to really go over. We're not going to have a test on the distinctions and all that. So here's an overview of police psychology. It's the application of psychological principles and clinical skills to law enforcement and public safety. Like other sub-areas of forensic psychology, it should be based on research knowledge. I just caught my chat. Hey, cats, it's great to see you. I just caught the chat moving out of the side of my eye. So I wanted to look up real quick. I got my finger where I left off, but I want to reserve this for that topic. Therapeutic treatments, TMS, ECT, etc. Yeah, I like those. Okay. Mr. Lantern, hello. Cats, hello. Pixie Dust, hello. Everyone, feel free to chat as I'm going over this. You always feel smarter when you listen to you. Or when you listen to me, I mean. Yes, clinician is such a big spectrum. I have some with autism, so that's where I'm most interested in. Then I love true crime. Yes, it's vast. Psychology is vast. Like, if a psychologist ever tells you that they know everything there is to know, they're full of shit, because, you just can't. You always feel smarter. Well, let me help you feel smarter. I'm kind of rushing through this last bit of this part because, cats, I'm excited to get to the next part, which is, and we still have many pages of this, which is going to be police and investigative psychology. I can't wait to get to that. So I'm skipping big chunks of this because I don't think it's necessary that we all know the salaries and the costs of these degrees and all that. We can look those up on Google if we're interested in that. But please, everyone, talk in the side chat. It will not disturb me a single bit. And, even if you have a question or a thought that you want to share later, put it in the side chat so you don't forget it. Use the side chat as your little note board or whatever, and we can all discuss it when I'm not actively reading information to you. So let's get back to police psychology. It should be based on research knowledge, yes. The term police psychology is somewhat imprecise because it appears to exclude other law enforcement agents such as deputy sheriffs, fish and wildlife agents, airport security, marshals, constables, and many types of other state and federal agents. The term law enforcement is more encompassing. However, critics of that term note that the enforcement of the law is only one of many tasks performed by police, and that law is often enforced selectively. The real work of police is maintaining order, providing service, keeping the peace, or being co-producers with citizens of public safety. Rather than adopt one or the other viewpoint, each has its merit. We will use police and law enforcement officers interchangeably and broadly to include the wide variety of agents listed above. All right, I need a sippy sip here. My throat's getting dry. Okay, back to this. The relationship between psychology and law enforcement has waxed and waned over the years, with considerable forensic psychology involvement followed by a period of quiet. Overall, though, as law enforcement agencies have become more professional, law enforcement supervisors and directors better educated, and the public more critical and concerned, there has been a substantial increase in the need for services provided by forensic or police psychologists. Not only do they perform pre-employment psychological assessments, but also fitness for duty evaluations, special unit evaluations, hostage team negotiations, and deadly force incident evaluations. Side note, and fun fact about me, I had always kind of dreamed of being a hostage negotiator. I would love that job, but I can't even imagine um, how much control it takes when you're having a bad day to not just be like, fuck it, kill them all. I'm so sorry. I know that's not necessarily a funny thing, but I know me, and this is why I decided that counseling was not my thing either, because I just don't have the kind of control it takes to always be on, to always, there are times when I would just as soon watch the world burn because I am having a really bad day. Hey, Anna, it's great to see you. Happy New Year and all the best to you as well. Yes, the anxiety of the job would be terrible. That's right. It would. And if things didn't go well, having that on your mind and on your conscience, I would think that you have to be a really strong person to walk away after a bad outcome and be able to say, you know what? I did my best and I'm going to go into the next situation and do my best again. Because I would think if you have a really bad outcome, it would be so difficult to go into the next situation. Okay. At any rate, now we're just breaking down the percentages of who holds what degree and all that. We don't really need to know that. Let's see. Okay, so we go on to the psychology of crime and delinquency. The psychology of crime and delinquency is the science of the behavioral and mental processes of the adult and juvenile offenders. It is primarily concerned with how criminal behavior is acquired, evoked, maintained, and modified. See, that sounds very interesting. And a lot of us, even as lay people, have some idea about how criminal behavior is acquired, evoked, maintained, and modified. But to make that a specialty, that would be interesting. Okay, recent research has focused on the offender's cognitive versions of the world, especially his or her thoughts, beliefs, and values, and how they can be understood and changed if necessary. It assumes that various criminal behaviors are acquired by daily living experiences in accordance with the principles of learning and are perceived, coded, processed, and stored in memory in a unique fashion for each individual. Criminal psychology examines and evaluates prevention, intervention, and treatment strategies directed at reducing criminal behavior. So, one thing that comes to mind when talking about that is that, psychologists or researchers realized at some point, and I'm sure we've all heard this by now, but that if you're being robbed and they want your wallet, to throw your wallet and then run in the opposite direction, right? Because the psychology of that would be that if they want your wallet, they're going to chase after the wallet while you run in the other direction. So that's the kind of things, that they're saying is like understanding prevention, intervention, and all of that. Okay. Chronic violence usually develops. Okay, it says research in crime and delinquency has discovered, for example, that chronic violence usually develops when children do poorly in school, do not get along with peers, have abusive parents, and attend schools that do not control disruptive and violent behavior. Research has also found that social rejection by peers and others can lead to serious violent offending. A great deal of psychological functioning is predicated on belonging to the group and enjoying the benefits, both direct and indirect, of that belongingness. When this sense of belonging is removed or restricted, a feeling of isolation and social exclusion occurs that tends to produce significant changes in behavior, such as an increase in aggression, violence, and other maladaptive behaviors. Under these conditions, human behavior may become impulsive, chaotic, selfish, disorganized, and even destructive. School shooters, for example, frequently express a sense of social isolation and rejection. Researchers have also found, however, that well designed and carefully executed prevention programs can prevent violence and a lifelong career path of crime. For example, the Fast Track Prevention Program, developed by researchers at Duke University, Pennsylvania State University, Vanderbilt University, and the University of Washington, has shown highly promising results in reducing juvenile crime. We will discuss more on such programs in the chapters on crime and delinquency. Of late, applied psychologists working in school settings have found an increased need for their services, as we noted above. This has led to a keen interest in a new subdivision of school psychology, forensic school psychology. Oh. Educational programs are required in correctional and psychiatric facilities for young people throughout the country, and some states have established special school districts within these facilities. So that would mean like when a 14-year-old is taken into juvenile detention or taken into a psychiatric hospital or something, there are still school requirements that have to take place. So forensic school psychology then now becomes the area of interest. Rehabilitation of the juveniles, which includes but is not limited to education, is crucial. Consequently, assessment and counseling services are critical roles for the school psychologist within these settings. Although many forensic school psychologists primarily work with mentally disordered offenders and youth in correctional facilities, they also work with public and private schools on issues that potentially relate to the legal system. Forensic school psychologists routinely interact with a multitude of legal issues, local school concerns about discharge, possible placement into residential school programs, and its concomitant implications for the youngster's home school district, the limitations of client privilege, tactics during contested special education cases, and expectations of judges, attorneys, and facility staff pertaining to mental status and the client's legal commitment. Okay. The need for additional consultation with school psychologists within the public and private school systems across the country took on chilling urgency in the late 1990s when a rash of school shootings made headlines. Communities across the nation that had previously had a low profile, West Paducah, Kentucky, Jonesboro, Arkansas, Pearl, Mississippi, Springfield, Oregon, suddenly became well known. The most striking case was the mass murder of 12 students and one teacher at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado in April 1999. 20 other students were injured, some seriously, during that incident. The two teenage boys who were responsible for the shootings apparently committed suicide in the school library during the tragedy. To the public and news media, the shooters appeared to be two ordinary boys from normal middle-class families living in a suburb of Denver. As more information became public, the shooters were described as isolated teenagers, fascinated by weapons, and often ridiculed by other students. Although there has been a number of school shootings prior to Columbine, there had been at least 10 school shootings between 1996 and 1999. So in 3 years, 10, that's a lot. I mean, one is a lot. But when you figure that averages out to, 3 1/3 per year, that's crazy. A great deal of alarm and concern from parents across the United States. In addition, the media and some experts were quick to generalize about the skyrocketing school violence problem and demanded some kind of threat or risk assessment to identify those youth who might have similar intentions. Therefore, risk assessment has become more common. Such an assessment would occur, for example, when a student has made a spoken or written threat to harm classmates or teachers. Once a youth has been assessed, he or she may then be counseled in the school setting or in the community, or maybe even expelled from school. That assessment task often falls to the school psychologist. Despite the media attention directed to Columbine and the other school tragedies, it is important to keep school violence in perspective. The school shooting described occurred during a time when juvenile violent crimes was decreasing nationwide. Whenever the news media highlights certain events and dramatize their significance, the events seem to be more widespread and frequent to people than they really are. This phenomenon is called the availability heuristic. In reality, although the shootings were terrible and tragic, they were not representative of the juvenile crime picture as a whole. Furthermore, although the media understandably report incidents of children having guns on school premises, and we periodically learn of still another instance, there is no documentation that this is a widespread problem. See, I don't necessarily agree with this, but also we have to take into consideration that the date that this book was um, released, this is not like this year's thing. So actually, I didn't even look. I know it's the second edition. They probably had, 5 more editions since then. But that could just be my opinion as well. I've not really, looked at the actual research that they're quoting here. Some schools, of course, are more dangerous than others, and any risk is still unacceptable. We should note that the Virginia Tech killings in 2007 are not considered school shootings in the same sense as those mentioned here. Colleges and universities have larger, more open campuses, and the perpetrator in the Virginia case was not a juvenile. We discuss this case in more detail later in the book. Unfortunately, at present, there are very few formal training programs specializing in forensic school psychology. However, with the continual increase of youth confined in correctional facilities across the country who are in need of education and the push to make our schools a safer place, this discipline would seem to have a very promising future. Okay, let me check the chat real quick before we go on to victimology and victim services. That's how it feels as a parent of a kiddo on the spectrum who's almost 21, but still at home in meltdowns. Yeah, I can understand that too. Anna, we are just going over forensic psychology. We're all learning it together. If you'd like to learn it with us, please stay. If you don't have time, you can always catch it on the replay. This is where the Idaho 4 suspect is so intriguing. I wonder what they will learn. Exactly, Amar. The one thing they are missing the most, I believe, is how disabling PTSD is for kids. Many go unhurt and just get punished. Amar, I actually knew a young man who was present during the Jonesboro, Arkansas shooting. And when it happened, he was a large child, like very overweight. After the shooting, he lost like, I don't know, 170 pounds or so. He went down to almost nothing. His life, and he wasn't injured like physically, but and I'm trying not to give away, too much personal information or whatever on him, but it was kind of sad to see the state of his life afterwards. He was very outgoing and was always out playing and was always out with other friends and all of this. And afterwards, I mean, he lost a lot of weight, which, when you need to lose weight, that's always a good thing. But the fact that he wouldn't leave the house, he didn't want to talk to any of his friends anymore. And, I'm hoping that over the years he's gotten into some kind of specialized therapy for that. I don't think he finished high school. I'm not really sure because I lost contact with him. But Yeah, it was just kind of scary to see the changes in him. I think he was in sixth grade at the time. No, no, he would have been older than that. At any rate, I think that specialized therapy for people who have been involved in things like that, especially kids who have been present during a school shooting. All the kids get up and go to school every day, 5 days out of the week, 9 months out of the year. It's such a normal thing, and then for it to be so dysfunctional when something like that happens, that's just scary. How much it can change a young life. It just, to me, it is anyway. I think that's rather horrifying. Let me get a sip here. Hello, Daniel Berry, Sports Highlights. Right, Amer. Yeah, and he would have been in middle school at the time. I said sixth grade, but I think he might have been. I'm not sure. I really don't remember. But I just remember it was very sad. He started staying online a lot, not going outside, not wanting to see his friends, didn't want to go to school, which can you blame him? Okay, victimology and victim services. Victimology refers to the study of persons who have experienced either actual or threatened physical, psychological, social, or financial harm as a result of the commission or attempted commission of crime against them. The harm may be direct or primary against those who experience it and its consequences firsthand, or indirect and secondary against family members, relatives, survivors, or friends who experience the harm because of their closeness to the victim. Violent victimization of children, such as terrifying abductions, school shootings, and SA, can disrupt the course of child development in very fundamental ways and can be associated with emotional and cognitive problems over the course of the lifespan. And I don't think any of us are surprised to hear that. Um, as a matter of fact, I think in previous eras, the um, the violence against children was kind of tried to, oh, suck it up, toughen up, whatever, forget about it, get over it. And there are still people who try and play those cards against people who've been victimized. But I don't think anymore that any of us are surprised at how much that plays a part in a child's growth experiences in life and all of that. So, um, in adults, there is a strong evidence that the effects of criminal victimization, such as assault, robbery, and burglary, are both pervasive and persistent. Until recently, psychological services were received by a very small fraction of crime victims, only 2 to 7%. In fact, it has only been within the past 30 years that criminal victimology has become recognized as a scientific and professional field of study. So that's kind of what I was saying. In the past, people would just suck it up, get over it, whatever. And only, 2 to 7% of people who were victimized ever sought any kind of services. Um, I hope it's much, much more than that, if they say here. Uh, Students wishing to pursue a research career in victimology probably should obtain a research doctorate in psychology, criminal justice, social work, or sociology. Over the past 25 years, the field of victim services has become a rapidly growing profession, and not all of these services relate to crime victims. Today, there's greater understanding of victims' issues due to legislation enacted to support victims' rights, increased funding for victim services, the efforts of victim advocates, and active research in victimology. In particular, victim services concentrating on victims of SA, domestic violence, and partner, child, and elder abuse have noticeably grown in recent years. Examples of the recent legislation are the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Prevention Act, and the U.S. Patriot Act, which, among its least controversial provisions, addresses the needs and concerns of victims of terrorist acts. Recently, the APA has established a national network of psychologists with training in disaster response who offer volunteer services to relief workers and victims of human-made or natural disasters. It is called the Disaster Response Network. And I actually have a friend who was part of this type of a thing. I don't know if she worked directly for the Disaster Response Network or if it was some other agency, but living here in Texas, when Katrina happened, she was sent to New Orleans to help the victims there psychologically. And I think that she really felt that that was doing some good for them. And I'm sorry, I just kind of lost my train of thought. You guys know that I can usually pay attention for about an hour. An hour is usually my attention span limit, and it's been what, almost 50 minutes. So yeah, we're getting to the end of my my attention span here, but I want to finish this up because Wednesday we are going to police and investigative psychology. Good night, Anna. It's wonderful to see you again. I hope you'll stop in. Like I said, if any of this interests you, you can always listen to it on the playback and leave a comment to let me know you were here. I get so excited when I see people I haven't seen in a long time. Okay, so then there's legal psychology. It's an umbrella term for the scientific study of a wide assortment of topics reflecting the close relationship between psychology and the courts. These topics include competencies and criminal responsibility, like the insanity defense, civil commitment, the psychology of the jury, how to pick juries. Jury selection is a big psychological game, and we all know that. You don't want someone who can't relate to your client, right? Women are often, they know all the research on this stuff. Women are the ones who, will be tougher on certain crimes and more lenient on others. And I don't know what the specifics are of these things that I'm saying are, because I haven't done the research, but I know the overview. You want more women on a jury for a certain crime, or you want more men if your client has worked in some field or whatever. There is a psychology to all of it. So that's that. Then we have family forensic psychology, like for family law, for divorces, things like that, child support, child custody. Correctional psychology says it's arguably the fastest growing branch of forensic psychology. The correctional psychologist typically has specific academic and/or program training in correctional philosophy, systems, offender management, forensic report writing, treatment aimed at reducing recidivism, and outcome research. Okay, we'll skip that. Defining forensic psychology, a recap. The foregoing sections indicate that the field of forensic psychology, this is wrapping up this chapter so that Wednesday we can start on the new section, as we define it broadly, provides ample opportunities for psychologists interested in interacting with some aspect of the law. We have devoted separate sections of this book to each of the 5 sub-areas defined above. It should be noted that those who favor a narrow definition of forensic psychology are referring primarily to the clinical practice that falls under our sub-areas of legal psychology and correctional psychology. So much of this I can kind of skip over. As recently as 25 years ago, the term forensic psychology had barely been introduced into psychological or legal literature. Today, as we have seen, it is a commonly encountered term, but it still defies particular definition. Although the consensus might seem to favor a narrow definition, limiting it to clinical practice, the contributions of research psychologists may be undermined by such an approach. In addition, it is important to consider the context in which forensic psychology is practiced. Limiting forensic psychology to work with civil and criminal courts and correctional systems, which seems to be the consequence of a narrow definition, does not recognize well enough the law-related functions performed by psychologists during the law enforcement during or working with law enforcement or victims. Finally, the many contributions of psychologists who study the psychology of crime and delinquency deserve to be included in this field. The legal system surely can benefit, for example, from research on the developmental paths to delinquency or research on the prevention and control of sex offenders. We have persisted then in advocating for a broad definition of forensic psychology, one that could divide it into 5 sub-areas covered in this chapter. In fact, in structuring the book, we came very close to adding a 6th area, the forensic school specialization discussed under crime and delinquency. Given the rapid development and increasing need for services within the educational system, it may be only a matter of time before such a sub-area of forensic psychology is warranted. Likewise, family forensic psychology, discussed under legal psychology but having obvious relevance to other subspecialties, may be deserving of the same special attention. In each of the areas discussed, numerous career opportunities exist. Both undergraduate and graduate programs have rapidly seen the need for preparation for careers in forensic psychology, and professionals themselves are regularly offered opportunities for licensing, certification, and continuing education. That is the end of that part, the introduction to this interesting delve into forensic psychology. So, with all of that out of the way, when we come back here Wednesday, we will be delving into the history and practice of police psychology in part 2 of the book designated for police and investigative psychology. Right, forensic psychologists stand up in court, so it's not just a guessing game. Exactly. Exactly. For a lot of people and a lot of what we've been hearing on the internet, dealing with these cases that we all get interested in, so much of it is just people sitting back and speculating and guessing and looking at things only from their own perspective, from their own idea of how life works. And that is just not good enough, I don't think. Which is why, we're going to give ourselves a little certification at the end of learning this. It'll be made up and totally useless. But, hey, it'll be just as valid as anyone else's point of view at that point on the internet. So I want to thank you guys for coming in. Like I said, next week looks like it's going to start getting interesting. On Wednesday, we will meet back here and try to cover half of police and investigative psychology. And then, we'll keep moving on. I love this stuff too, Amer. And, like I said, if later something comes up, leave a comment under this. And if you have any suggestions or ideas on how this could be more efficient or more inclusive, let me know in the comments. And hey, we'll figure it out until we get this working like a well-oiled machine. So I'm just glad y'all show up, personally. because I could sit here and do this by myself, um, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's so much more interesting when you can discuss it with other people. It helps you to solidify the knowledge in your mind when you discuss it, and it helps me to, to feel like I'm actually learning. So, okay, well, I am out of here. Have a wonderful start of your week. It is officially Monday here where I am in Texas, so don't let the Monday blues get you. Keep it up spirited, and just, go out there and have the day you deserve and deserve the day you have. I love y'all, and I will see you Wednesday. I do have an email. Let me put it in the chat for you, Amer. Let me type it in here, because when I say it, it's JENNIFAERIE at live.com. There it is, jennifery@live.com. I do not check my email very often. So, if Wednesday, when you're here that you sent me an email and I haven't responded, please let me know in the chat that you sent me an email, which will remind me to check my email. And that's just kind of how I'm always behind on everything. I'm so bad with checking email, checking my real mail outside. I'll go out to the mailbox and there'll be like this huge bundle of mail with a big rubber band around it, where my mailman's trying to say, "Would you take your dang mail in?" Okay, Amer, just know that that I am not like really specialized in autism. However, I have been looking more into it because recently there is someone in my life who has been newly diagnosed with autism. And so, often when it becomes part of someone who is important to us, that's when we decide we need to look more into it, right? And so I'll, if I need to, I might need to learn from you on some of that. As I said, in getting your degree, you learn about these things, but you never learn as much as someone who's actually in it. So yes, please do send me an email. I will try to remember to check my email. But if I don't, you can always remind me in the comment section or in the side chat. So have a great night. Have a great week. And I will see you back here Wednesday evening, probably late like it was tonight. That's usually when things settle down for me. So bye-bye. Love you.